Hey guys, I'm Joe, and welcome back to my series of Harry Potter reviews leading up to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which is coming out in a month or so. Time goes by really fast, doesn't it? And today we're going to continue with Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Chris Columbus returns to direct this movie, and this movie came out a year after The Sorcerer's Stone. And I have to say, like with Sorcerer's Stone, I think this movie holds up pretty well. If you saw my review for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, not my favorite of the series, and this one's not either, but I do like these first two movies, because the first one does a really good job of setting up this entire universe. This one has more of a focus on the characters and the mystery that's presented, and it has a slightly more darker tone than the previous one did. So let's talk about Chamber of Secrets, with spoilers of course. So when we're reintroduced to Harry Potter, he's still with his horrible guardians, and they've given him an actual bedroom to sleep in, but he's still being treated like garbage, and I would say even a little bit worse since he's gone to Hogwarts, and they think that he's fallen even further because how he's accepting his status as a wizard. His Uncle Vernon's having company over, so Harry's forced to go into his room and pretend that he doesn't even exist, and then he meets this character, Dobby. Dobby the house elf, who is kind of annoying at first, but he's kind of likable in some way, once we get to the ending, which we'll talk about later. But Dobby here tells Harry, you can't go back to Hogwarts. Bad stuff's gonna happen. Stay out of this. Now Harry, of course, doesn't like the fact of staying away from Hogwarts because he likes it there and it's his home. Why would you want to go back to this family? I wouldn't. And as they talk, Harry discovers that Dobby has hidden letters from his friends to Harry in order to try to make him feel like maybe I don't want to go back to school. Harry doesn't like that, so he chases after Dobby. Dobby gets him in trouble by causing this nice-looking cake to collapse on Uncle Vernon's boss's wife, and therefore they lock Harry in his room. So Ron and his brothers come to the rescue in a flying car, and they bring him to their house, and that's where we meet Ron's dad, Arthur Weasley. And we also get another look at Diagon Alley, and then we get introduced to another character named Gilderoy Lockhart, played by Kenneth Branagh, who is very known to be a very Shakespearean type of director, and he's actually gone on to direct the first Thor in the MCU. Very interesting connection right there. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm copying Chris Stuckman's review, but the moment when Ginny sees Harry sitting at the breakfast table, the bug-eyed look, it's so cute. And since I brought up earlier that Dobby tells Harry about some things are about to happen at Hogwarts, the biggest improvement with this movie in comparison to its predecessor is that it actually gets into the mystery plot almost immediately, rather than feeling the need to set up all this other stuff. Not that it was bad to do that in the first movie because it was the introduction and you needed to do that, but this one has the benefit of being a sequel to that movie, so therefore, they do bring you up to speed in some ways as to what's going on, but the movie gets right on with the story. And even though it's a little too long in some places, it does move a little bit faster. And that's one thing I noticed. I felt like this movie moves pretty fast, and because you're so into the characters and what's happening in the story. So when Harry and Ron are at the train station and they realize that they can't get inside the barrier, Ron decides to use the flying car that his father drives in order to get to Hogwarts. I actually really like this scene. It's pretty fun. I had a lot of fun with it as a kid. Ron, I should tell you, most muggles aren't accustomed to seeing a flying car. Right. I remember feeling the exact same thing when the one guy in the car looks up and sees the flying car going, what the hell? And they nearly get run over by the Hogwarts Express, but they manage to survive. And then by the time they get to the school, they crash into this tree called the Whomping Willow. In the process, Ron breaks his wand. Poor guy. He has the worst luck. My wand! Look at my wand! Be thankful it's not your neck. And after that, it's really just a lot of scenes of them being in school, going to class, eating lunch, Harry hanging out with the Quidditch team, and so on. But you do get a little bit of a different side to it. You actually get to see Madame Sprout's class. She teaches about mandrakes, which make the most awfulest sound you'll ever hear. Oh, God, I hate those things. But apparently they're useful for resuscitating people who are petrified. So there's something. And then on to the Defense Against the Dark Arts class scene, with Kenneth Branagh's Gilderoy Lockhart replacing Professor Quirrell. I have to say, I didn't like Gilderoy Lockhart then, and I still don't like him now. I found him very annoying and very full of himself and arrogant, but if that's the whole point of his character, then so be it. Kenneth Branagh really plays it very well, and I gotta give credit where it's due. And he unleashes all these pixies on the entire class. It's like, does this guy have any clue what he's doing? And I remember reading that part in the book, Hermione. He didn't even look like he knew what he was doing. And also in that scene when they all go loose and Neville gets thrown onto that chandelier. Why is it always me? Draco is still a little ass, to say the least, but his father, Lucius Malfoy, I think he's even worse than Draco. He is so... Oh, man. Talk about vile scum, lack of a better word. Props to Jason Isaacs. He really nails it. Yeah, I hated that character, and I was so glad that Dobby was able to use some kind of magic trick to knock him down on his backside. But Malfoy also uses the word mudblood when he's talking to Hermione, which when I first saw this, I thought, like, I didn't know what it meant at first, but even then I knew that's actually really mean. And it turns out that Hermione is a muggle who happens to be chosen for magic, or however it goes. If any Harry Potter nerd out there knows, feel free to tell me, but I know that's sort of how it goes. She's descended from people who aren't wizards or witches, if that's how it goes. And a family like the Malfoys think that those kind of people should not be included in the school. But then we finally get the first mention of the Chamber of Secrets, when Harry's in Gilderoy Lockhart's office helping him answer his fan mail, and then Harry hears this weird voice. Come to me. Let me rip you. It is really, really creepy and suspenseful at the same time. I remember first watching this as a kid, and it was like, what is that? So Harry, Ron, and Hermione try to follow the voice, and they find this message. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the heir, beware. And Argus Filch's cat, Mrs. Norris, is petrified, frozen stiff. And somehow, Harry stands accused of this. But of course we know that Harry never did something like that, but Mr. Filch and some other students start to think that maybe he did it, but no, it couldn't be. Later on, unfortunately, after Harry's hurt in a Quidditch game, Harry's in the hospital, and he gets another visit from Dobby, who reveals to him that he's the one who stopped Harry and Ron from going through the barrier, and actually released the bludger on Harry during the Quidditch game, which caused it to break his arm, and urges him to leave, but Harry of course refuses, and he accidentally slips out that history is repeating itself. When Harry tries to get it out of him, Dobby disappears. But then Dumbledore and McGonagall come in with another student who's been attacked, Colin Creevey, who's unknowingly using a camera, who was petrified, and therefore Dumbledore tells McGonagall, the school's no longer safe. We have to do something here, which leads us into the duel scene between Snape and Lockhart, which is actually a really fun scene. Expelliarmus! Scared Potter, you wish.
Rictus Emperor!
Bullseye. But then, Malfoy uses a curse on Harry to create a snake. And then the snake starts creeping up on this one student named Justin. And then we learn something interesting about Harry. He can speak Parseltongue. He can talk to snakes, which we know that he talked to a snake in the previous one when he accidentally set that python on his cousin. But this one, we actually hear him speak a really scary and bizarre language. Now this scene was the first time that I actually watched this movie. I was with a friend. We were at his birthday party. We were about 12 or 13 years old. We rented this movie from Blockbuster, and by the time he popped it in, this scene was on, and I decided to just watch it with him anyway because it was Harry Potter and I was excited to watch it. But I can vividly remember getting freaked out when he started speaking Parseltongue. I think my mouth might have dropped because I was watching it going. And then people start to suspect that maybe he is the heir of Slytherin. Speaking of the heir of Slytherin, there's a scene earlier where McGonagall explains the idea of the Chamber of Secrets. The four founders of Hogwarts, Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, interesting connection with the shirt that I'm wearing, and Salazar Slytherin founded the school. Except for Salazar Slytherin, the rest of the wizards were able to coexist and come to an agreement on who should be admitted to the school. Slytherin, on the other hand, didn't want anybody who was a muggle to be admitted to the school. That purebloods should be worthy, and no one else. And according to legend, he built a hidden chamber known as the Chamber of Secrets, which is said to be the home of a monster, and the true heir of Slytherin would return to finish what he started. And Salazar Slytherin, as Hermione explains to Harry, was a parcel mouth, and he could talk to snakes as well. So people start to suspect that Harry is the heir of Slytherin. And then Justin, who that snake almost attacked earlier, is later found petrified after Harry hears that voice again. But Dumbledore, after all this, says, no, this isn't Harry, come on. Harry and the rest of the trio start to suspect that maybe Malfoy's the heir of Slytherin because of his known hatred for muggles. Hermione cooks up a polyjuice potion which changes the physical appearance of oneself in order to interrogate Malfoy. But it turns out he's not the heir of Slytherin, and that his father told him that the Chamber of Secrets was opened 50 years prior, and that a Muggle-born was killed after the Chamber of Secrets was opened. And later on, in the girls' bathroom where they brewed this potion, Harry discovers a diary that was once owned by a student named Tom Riddle. And after writing in the diary writes back to him saying, "Let me show you about the Chamber of Secrets." And so Harry has traveled back in time into the past, where he sees a young Tom Riddle talking with Dumbledore about what's happening. And then he follows Riddle, who actually confronts Hagrid, and it seems that Hagrid was the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets and used his big giant spider Aragog to attack the young student. So therefore, Harry decides to confront Hagrid about it. But later on, Hermione is petrified too. Harry and Ron decide to go confront Hagrid, but then Dumbledore and Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic, shows up. Ron and Harry are hiding underneath the invisibility cloak. Hagrid has to be taken away to Azkaban because of certain things that were on his record in the past, presumably about Aragog and the accusations about him. And then Lucius Malfoy shows up and tells Dumbledore that the governors of the Ministry want him to resign. Now, we'll talk about this later on with Goblet of Fire, but it's pretty clear, years later especially, that Malfoy had an agenda and probably was acting on Voldemort's part. Again, we'll get to that later on. And then it leads into the scene afterwards with the spider scene, which adds to the very creepy atmosphere that this movie has. Watching this a few hours ago, I was cringing so hard. And I felt Ron's pain as he was looking around going, I can't stress this enough. Ron is so funny. He's so likable. And going back to the disguising scene earlier, when Ron and Harry get the drop on Crabbe and Goyle, one of my favorite lines right here.
How thick could you get?
But in their talk with Aragog, they also learn that Hagrid was innocent. He never opened the Chamber of Secrets. And after visiting Hermione in the hospital, Harry discovers a piece of paper that she has in her hand, which talks about the basilisk, which is the voice that Harry has been hearing every time there's an attack on somebody, at least the first couple before Hermione's petrified, that is. Now, before I get into the climax, I've talked a lot about the plot and what's going on here, but I have to say, this movie does improve a lot on its predecessor because of its slightly darker tone. It has a more straightforward plot, and it moves a little bit faster than its predecessor. And the Quidditch scenes actually look a lot better than the first one did. It's more fun, and the rivalry between Malfoy and Harry makes it a little more fun. Training for the ballet, Potter! But that being said though, if there's any negatives that I have with this movie, it's a little too long, and I feel like maybe they could have shaved just a couple minutes off to make it feel a little more fluid. Gilderoy Lockhart, I'm not a huge fan of that character, but if there's one thing that I cannot stand about this movie, it's this character, Moaning Myrtle. Oh my god. Oh, I hate that voice. Oh my god. Yeah, I'm done. I'm done talking about that. And since I've mentioned the Quidditch matches with the CGI in this movie is a good improvement also, especially with the character of Dobby. As I was watching the scene where we first meet Dobby, I was looking at it really closely and saying, it's CGI, but it looks pretty good, even for 2002. The only time when the CGI kinda goes off is when they're in the hospital scene, when Dobby is talking to Harry. It's a little darker, it's a little different lighting with the candles and everything. Looks a little slightly off, but mostly it holds up pretty well. But back to the climax. Harry and Ron discover the piece of paper that Hermione was holding when she was attacked, and they discover that the basilisk from the Chamber of Secrets is indeed a snake, and it's a parcel mouth, which is why Harry can hear it speak. Colin was able to see the snake through his camera. Justin saw the basilisk through the ghost nearly headless Nick. Hermione had the mirror. And Mrs. Norris, the cat, saw the snake's reflection on the puddle of water that night. And they also come to the realization that Moaning Myrtle was the girl that died 50 years ago, the last time the Chamber of Secrets was opened. But then later on, they discover another message written by the heir of Slytherin. Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever. And as the teachers are talking, they discover it's Ginny Weasley, Ron's sister. And since Gilderoy Lockhart has been tasked to find the girl, Harry and Ron go for his help, but then they discover that he's trying to run away, and also that he's just a fraud. And when he tries to get the drop on him, they force him to go to the Chamber of Secrets with them. Harry's able to open the Chamber of Secrets using Parseltongue. So they go in. Lockhart tries to wipe their memories with Obliviate, but since he's using Ron's wand, it backfires and erases his memory completely. Very fortunate, I must say, for Ron and Harry. Hearts of a lion on this one. But Harry and Ron get separated in the collapse of falling rocks, so Harry decides to continue on, telling Ron to wait for him to come back. Harry continues on, finds Ginny, and then discovers Tom Riddle. And it's right there he learns that Ginny was the one who opened the Chamber of Secrets, set the basilisk loose in the school, wrote the threatening messages on the walls, then tried to dispose the diary in the girls' bathroom. But she didn't do it intentionally. It was because the power of the diary had her under a kind of trance. And how did she get her hands on that diary? Malfoy slipped the diary into her cauldron that day at Diagon Alley. Like I said, he had an agenda, but we'll cover that later. And after talking with Riddle, we also discover that this guy is not all that he seems, obviously, after he's telling him about Ginny Weasley, and that he told her to do these things, but we also learn that he is actually Lord Voldemort at the age of 16. And this is his way of trying to come back to his reign of power. And then he sets loose the basilisk on Harry, and we finally get a good look at this thing, and ugh. So Harry fights off the basilisk with the sword that Fawkes, the Phoenix from Dumbledore's office, leaves for him. And I have to say, watching this scene with John Williams' music, I got Indiana Jones vibes. Swashbuckling type of atmosphere you get in this scene, it's exciting. I was waiting for Indiana Jones to pop up, but oh well. Harry kills the basilisk, then he destroys the diary with the tooth, and then destroying that form of Voldemort forever, which actually turns out to be one Horcrux down, which we'll cover that in Half-Blood Prince later on. Harry, Ginny, and Ron and Gilderoy Lockhart get out. Harry and Dumbledore have another conversation about him feeling a little bit uneasy about the fact that he's very similar to Tom Riddle, Voldemort, since they both speak Parseltongue. And once again, it's this scene which contains a really good moral message as to what makes Harry Potter so endearing of a character, despite having some similarities to Voldemort, because he's a pure-hearted soul at his core. He doesn't want to cause harm to other people. He cares about his friends and his family. And then Malfoy comes in and has a conversation with Dumbledore, and then we learn that Malfoy is actually Dobby's master. And you can understand why Dobby is this poor broken creature, especially when Malfoy hits him like twice in the head with that stick. And it makes it all the more satisfying when this happens. You shall not harm Harry Potter. And listen to what Malfoy says here. He was actually about to say Avada Kedavra. And after that, Harry, Ron, and Hermione reunite, Hagrid comes back to Hogwarts, and everybody's happy, and so on. But since I brought that up, Chris Stuckman did point this out in his video that it does feel like kind of a retread of Sorcerer's Stone, and I could see what he means by that, and in some ways it kind of is, because there are similar scenes. It's similar to Home Alone 1 and 2. Home Alone 2 is basically the same movie, but in a different location. But at the same time, I don't really get bothered by that kind of stuff, and in here, it is a little noticeable, and while you could say that it maybe does drag the film down a little bit, there's different stuff happening in these scenes where I can actually forgive it, and franchises like Harry Potter, or Star Wars, or Batman, Spider-Man, whatever, there's going to be callbacks and echoes of the previous movies, so that stuff is just going to happen. All it really matters is how you choose to use that to your advantage, and I'm not really bothered by that personally, because seeing these three characters come together and being happy to be together again, I don't want to sound like a sap, but it just brought a huge smile to my face because these three guys, they're great. They're probably the biggest reason why this series is still resonating with a lot of people, myself included. All in all, Chamber of Secrets I think is a pretty good improvement over its predecessor since it doesn't have to introduce everything in the first act or so, but it is a little too long, and I feel like maybe they could have shaved just a little bit of time off of it. All in all, I really like Chamber of Secrets, just like the first one. So thank you guys for watching my review on Chamber of Secrets, and stay tuned for my review of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, my personal favorite in this series. Can't wait to talk about that. What are your thoughts on Chamber of Secrets? Do you like it? Hate it? Love it? You think it's alright? Whatever your thoughts are, comment below and tell me, and I'll see you next time.